You can't prepare for ADHD. As much as I have learned about it, every day is still different. It is constantly changing and evolving. It presents differently at different ages and different stages in their life. So every time I think I have a handle on it, now they're X amount of pounds or X years old, and now the shit has changed and I don't know what the fuck to do. It's become something that is a depression point for me. What's up, siblings? Welcome to another episode of Two Different Sisters, the podcast.
We're your hosts,
Cassie, i.e., not a Y.
and I'm Juju. On this episode, we'll be talking about raising ADHD Neurodivergent children.
Before we get into it, we need y'all to hit that subscribe button, plus like this video, and it'll equal to us keeping this content coming.
According to Oxford Dictionary, neurodivergent is a differing in mental or neurological functions. Attention Deficit Hyperactive Disorder, also known as ADHD, is a developmental disorder characterized by an ongoing pattern of one or more of the following types of symptoms. Inattention, such as having difficulties paying attention, keeping on track, or staying organized. Hyperactivity, such as often moving around, including during inappropriate times, feeling restless, or talking excessively. Impulsivity, such as interrupting, intruding on others, or having trouble waiting one's turn.
I find it interesting that that is the definition of ADHD, because the definition specifically lists inattentiveness, hyperactivity, and impulsivity. Growing up, that's literally what they made us believe ADHD or ADD was. Once you heard, somebody had that, it's like, oh, that kid is hyper. Oh, that kid don't pay attention. And that's pretty much what it was. It wasn't anything more to that. But in my journey of raising ADHD neurodivergent children, I've come to learn that it is so much deeper than just those three broad common symptoms. I had to write notes for this one. Because of their inattentiveness and hyperactivity, it affects their memory recall. They have trouble with either short-term memory, long-term memory, or both. They talk and play loudly. They don't even realize they're doing it. They're just so hyper. They're so inattentive to what's going on around them that their volume is on 1,000. Right. They're prone to making careless mistakes because their mind is moving so fast, because they're not paying attention. And they avoid tasks, right? A lot of times we'll look at them and think like, oh, you're just being lazy. But they actually avoid doing certain things for fear of not being able to accomplish it or do it the way a typical person would think that it should be done. Also, because of their impulsivity and hyperactivity, they have difficulty waiting their turn and sharing, and that makes it hard to get along with others. They have difficulty understanding boundary and personal space, which makes it hard for others to get along with them because they have this habit of always being on you or in your face. Another thing that I, found is that because of that impulsivity specifically, they're very prone to temptation and gravitating towards negative behavior and risk-taking. And I used to think it was a simple matter of, do you or do you not know right from wrong? Mm-hmm. But it's not about that for them. They are fully aware of the difference between what is right and what is wrong. But that lack of impulse control puts them in a position where they have this, almost like this itch that they have to scratch. So they have to go do it, even though they know it's wrong. And then more uncommonly known signs or symptoms, or under talked about signs and symptoms, is how it affects their self-esteem, especially, like in my case, I've noticed as they start to get into their teenage years. They're more prone to depression. They are more prone to mood irregularities. The way that they process and rationalize things is very different than how typical functioning people would do it. It affects their problem-solving skills. In my particular case, especially with my oldest son, he struggled with social cues for a very long time, which made it hard for others to get along with him and for him to get along with others as well, because the fact that he wasn't picking up some of the mannerisms or the jokes or the whatever, people really just started being like, yo, you mad weird, bro, or you're mad slow, bro. And then they're prone to daydreaming a lot. one of the things I remember when we was going through it with my oldest is it really used to piss people off that he would just stare at you when you're like either yelling at him or talking to him. It was almost like this glass blank stare. And I didn't know what it was, why he was doing that until, he got diagnosed and I started learning more about it. That is literally something that they're prone to doing. And it's not that they don't want to be listening to you or that they're, they don't care about what you're saying. Their mind is just moving at a rate that is so far beyond where their physical body is.
Right.
They just end up daydreaming or just staring at you like, whatever. Another thing I found to be pretty interesting, when I was coming up, there was a distinct difference between ADD and ADHD.
Right.
So I don't know, like, if you know this or not, and, siblings, how many of you may or may not know this. But now, as the science has evolved on it, improved and things like that, there actually is no more ADD. It's all categorized as ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and then it's broken down by the way it presents. So you're either ADHD primarily hyperactive, ADHD primarily inattentive, or you're ADHD with a combined presentation.
Okay. When did you notice that your children were different, and when were they diagnosed? Like what age?
The term different is not something we like to use in the community and dealing with ADHD. We use the term typical, right? They don't function or operate in a manner that society deems typical because they're not different, right? My sons enjoy the same, McDonald's and just like all the kids their age. My teenage son is into girls just like other boys his age. So different is something that we, stay away from in that community. But to answer your question, with my oldest son, I noticed when he was around 4 years old. He started early childhood. That's what they called it where we were living. And the teacher would tell me like, hey, he's so sweet, but we just kind of have a hard time getting him to stay on, tasks or whatever. But I'm like, it's early childhood. It's what we in New York consider like 4 PK or 3 PK, right? So I'm like, okay, but it was in the back of my mind. But then he went to a different school for kindergarten. And then the teacher was basically saying the same thing. Like, he's super sweet, but he doesn't really finish his work. And that started to come more from the back of my mind to like now the middle of my mind, right? And then I started noticing like he just had so much energy for no reason, right? Okay. I got to a point where it was hard for me to even go shopping with him because I'm like, hey, just stand right here by this rack. I'm just going to go literally like less than, a foot away to the next rack. Just stay right here. And I move and he's already karate chopping in the, like doing all types of stuff. And so I'm just like, okay. At the time, the primary care that he had was saying like, when I started bringing this, I'm like, yo, he's always, moving. Like I can't, he doesn't sit down. The teachers are starting to complain. They're like, it sounds like this, but unfortunately he's too young. We don't look into diagnosing them or even because, kids do have, energy and things like that. So we noticed it around 4 and then he got his official diagnosis at 7. My middle son, his diagnosis came, I believe, around that same age, 7, 8 years old. Okay. And then with my youngest son, first of all, my mind was already on observation mode. Kid number 1 had a diagnosis. Kid number 2 have a diagnosis. We on the lookout with kid number 3. So really, I noticed it. A lot of people thought it was funny, but from the time you taught him to walk, he never stopped moving. Okay. He was just on go mode. Even for me, like I said, because I'm in observation mode, when he would run, like, kids run from you and they take off, right? But with my youngest, he would do this thing, like he'd tuck his arms back and he was out of there. Phew! And I'm like, this is not, I know kids run and they take, but this is like.
When did you see him running like that? Like
we'd be outside or like.
How early, like what age? At 1 year old?
Not like at 4 when he was starting to run, like when he was taking off, I'm like, it's got a little extra kick to it. From the time he learned to walk, like he was getting into everything, like, and I understand kids touch but it was just excessive, even for a child that age, 1, 2, 3 years old. There was also concern with his speech clarity.
Okay.
By his, pediatrician, and so it caused us to look into, whatever. So I noticed it with him from pretty early,
okay.
but his diagnosis came around 5 years old.
Okay. And just speaking of that, because you were like more prone to paying attention to the cues, is it genetic?
So a long time ago, especially when my oldest son was first diagnosed, it was believed that it's not in any way linked to genetics, right? But then, like I said, the science has come such a long way that studies have shown that more than likely when the child has it, it stems from one or both of their parents.
Okay.
And it's funny because that got me to looking into like some of my habits and mannerisms. I am terrible at multitasking, keeping organized. I realized a lot of the things that I learned that my kids were displaying, I'm like, yo, I'm actually like that, right? But of course, from our day, our time, whatever, you wasn't getting diagnosed with nothing, right? So I don't have a diagnosis of it.
Okay.
But just paying attention to myself and, what I've learned from the kids. And even on their dad's side, he's expressed it to me. He's like, he don't have an official diagnosis, but he realized early on from when he was young that he displayed certain types of behaviors, a certain type of man. He didn't never know what it was, but even like till this day, his leg is always moving, or like he comes in the house and for no good reason other than the fact like he can't keep his hands still. I'll be in the kitchen cooking and he don't need nothing. He just opening the medicine cabinet and he's touching the seasoning.
You mean the seasoning cabinet?
Yeah, the seasoning cabinet that he's tasted so many times before. Like he's just looking. Oh, what's this here? What's like just touching things like. So
you guys are self-diagnosed. You guys
we're self-diagnosed, right?
Yeah. I only ask that because obviously siblings, we are sisters. I do have a young son. And I just wanted to know, like, because I'm also looking at the patterns because I've seen it in her children and other children in my life. A kid will be a kid. I understand that. But like she said, with her third, it stood out right away. So, like, I do pay attention to a lot of the cues just to see if, like, we're going in that direction as well.
Like I said, a lot of studies have shown that it's linked to genetics now. But you got to think about where our genetics link, you and I specifically.
Right.
What I've found in speaking to my other siblings who are not mommy's kids is that there's some stuff happening there, right?
Okay.
So I believe that where it's coming from in my genetics is on my father's side.
Okay. Because I was going to say, like, some of the things that you experience, like you said you've experienced when you were a child, remember? I did not. Like, I'm very organized. I'm very, like, structured. Like, so that's like...
We talked about, like, when the kids were diagnosed, right? As their aunt, how did you feel hearing about the diagnosis, now knowing that now you have nephews who are ADHD neurodivergent?
So for my oldest nephew, when he was diagnosed, I was at an age or like in a time where I kind of just brushed it off. But with her last son, we were all glued to the hips. Her oldest son and I were glued to the hip. But the thing was that I was there for his birth when she had him in Virginia, but he wasn't raised with me from the very beginning. They relocated back to New York when he was 5 years old. So like we did rebuild that relationship though. But with her youngest child,
he was born and raised
in my hand. So with him, I'm going to agree with her. I noticed it pretty early on. There was like no denying it there. So I was like, okay, so I didn't feel like, oh, they were like different. It was more so if I noticed somebody was looking at them differently or like trying it, I got in defense mode. But like me personally, I didn't look at them different, treat them any different. It was more so like I was more on guard when it came to other people, if they would try it. And in my presence, it's never really happened. So were you concerned about how the children would be viewed by family and others?
Way from my oldest, the initial concern for me was that he was not behaving in a typical manner. Right? Mm-hmm. That was my immediate concern, was that he's not behaving in a typical manner and I don't know why. So figuring out why, like what is happening to him or what is causing this. I remember having these conversations with mommy, right? I would bring it up and she's like, oh, boys are, just let him be a boy. Oh, and even the doctors, oh, they're young, whatever. And I'm like, no, this is I don't know what this is, but I know that it is something.
Okay.
This example that never leaves my mind is he lost 2 coats in the same winter school year. And I'm not talking about like the spring jackets and shit. I'm talking about the North Face, the big fucking coats.
Right.
He lost the first one, then we got him another one, and he lost that one in that same school year. I'm like, this is not typical. You're not going to tell me, oh, he's young, they lose things. You're not going to tell me, oh, boys will be boys. It's the goddamn winter. You don't feel like you cold immediately. Something is off here. And I don't know what it is. I don't know why it's affecting him this way. So that was the immediate concern for me when I started noticing things. Now, once the ink dried on the diagnosis, I wasn't so much concerned with what people would think about them just because they had the diagnosis of ADHD, right? The concern for me became the lack of education and information surrounding ADHD, particularly in the Black and Brown community and Caribbean communities, and how that lack of education would cause people to label them. Okay. Because when, we're 3 years apart, so I don't necessarily know how it was like in your classroom or whatever, school. But for me, you didn't hear much, from kids saying they have ADHD or grown-ups saying, oh, this child has ADHD, right? If a child was misbehaving or they wasn't listening or they was falling behind in school, you was bad, you was a problem, or you was dumb. That was it. Okay. It wasn't a diagnosis, right? And if you fall into any of those categories, they sent your ass to special ed. That was the solution. Right. I say that to say it's so under-talked about. And because it's so under-talked about, it's so underdiagnosed, which causes a lot of mislabeling for kids in our communities. Especially in the Haitian household, you ain't got no ADHD.
Right. You disordered,
you malade. Right. You're bad. You're disrespectful. Right. Like, it ain't ADHD. And when they got diagnosed, when all the pamphlets started being placed in front of me and me having to learn about it, I realized how much I didn't know, how much I was not taught in our community. And it opened me up to realizing that there is a lack of education. And even till this day, with my oldest, I've been going through this for 15 years. Until this day, I still have people saying, I know they say he have it, but Cass, I just think he playing with you. Because people in our community don't know that this thing is real and it's deeper than just they're hyper. Right. This thing is so under talked about in our community that, did you know ADHD has an awareness month?
Yeah, that was last month, right?
No.
That wasn't April?
No.
Oh, no, that was autism. What month
it's in October.
October, yeah.
Now, I didn't know that until I had to sit down and learn about ADHD. And when I realized I didn't know, I started asking people. And 7 out of 10 people, adult, that I've spoken to, have no idea or had no idea that ADHD actually has a National Awareness Month. Yeah. And at least in New York, there's never been a walk for it, anything. Really? And these are things that are severely and heavily impacting these kids' day-to-day life. Their academics, their socio-emotional.
That's crazy.
So that really became the biggest concern for me. Siblings, let us know in the comments what neurodivergent condition your child and or family members have. For you as the aunt, you're not parenting them, but you are raising them, right? What is the hardest part for you, or what do you find most difficult about raising ADHD neurodivergent nephews?
I think the most difficult part for me is not so much that I forget that they have the diagnosis, because I don't forget. It's just that I'm somebody, especially, so we go out often together. I'm somebody.
It's true. Sorry, she take the kids out so much that in public, he's your child. Yeah. Behind closed doors, they're my kids.
We're like the type of family, like, no matter if they have a diagnosis, no diagnosis, when we go out, like, let's say to like indoor parks or something like that. It's like, this is where we are. You guys will go play. You know where to find us when you're ready
The
to eat.
expectation is still typical, right?
So sometimes if I notice like I'm moving and you're not moving at the speed that I need you to, it's like, what are you doing? So it's not that I forget. It's just sometimes in the moment of like things happening, I have this expectation. And when they're having fun, they also forget, like, okay, we're outside, relax. Another thing that I find hard is that I treat them the same when they don't have the exact same diagnosis. So, like,
they don't have the same presentation.
Yeah, they don't have the same presentations, right?
Gotcha,
So, what I may assume or expect one to do, like, let's say wash the dishes in 5 seconds versus one of them taking 10 minutes, because they don't have the same presentations of the ADHD, the understanding, like, okay, they both have it, they should be doing things at the same speed, or they're choosing to do this and not that. It's like remembering, okay, well, for one, his presentation is this way, and then for the younger one, his presentation is this way. I think for me, that's probably the hardest part. Outside of that, yeah, no. Like you said, they're not different. It's just not typical. What would you say is the hardest part about raising ADHD neurodivergent children?
One of the biggest things that I've found difficult in my journey is the lack of school-based support for children with ADHD. For one of my classes in school, I recently did a presentation and I touched on this topic. There are 7.1 million school-age children in the U.S. that have an official diagnosis of ADHD. 7.1 million kids. And of those 7.1 million kids, 33% of them receive no school-based support, even though they have this diagnosis. ADHD is not classified as ADHD when it comes to the school and the support that they give it.
Autism, right? They said?
No.
What is it?
It's classified as OHI, other health impairment.
Oh, okay.
It's so hard, or at least for me, it was so hard getting an IEP for my oldest son. It was so hard. He got diagnosed at 7. The school was noticing the behaviors and the things, and he had from a doctor, a medical professional, this, you know, on a, what they call it, a prescription pad written for me to give to the school, and they still refused to give him school-based support services until he was 10 years old. Every year, the school is refusing me.
Why were they refusing you?
They kept telling me everybody has a bit of ADHD. And that shit pisses me off to my core. Yes, we all get a bit forgetful. Yes, we all get a little, hyper every now and again. But what makes it a condition versus just something we all do is the excessivity of it. The volume at which it's impacting your everyday life. So don't tell me we all have it when you are constantly calling home telling me I need to come up to the school because you can't get him to stay and do this. He's not turning in assignments. He's falling behind in class. Or I have to leave work or drop my classes because y'all constantly need me in the school building. He can't attend school trips unaccompanied anymore. Don't tell me we all have it.
Right.
We can clearly see this. This is something outside of the scope of we all have it that's happening here. So give me the support that you guys are supposed to give so that I can help y'all help him.
Right.
That for me has been a very difficult part of this process.
Do you feel like because maybe they felt, I don't want to say he was on a borderline or like on the cuff of it, right, where they feel like, okay, he's doing this, well,
absolutely.
So
absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. They were also telling me, oh, well, Mom, he's not a danger to himself or the other kid. Okay. So we can't give him a para. We can't do that. We can't do that. If he's not constantly cursing people out, then they don't feel like he needs it. It speaks to, I feel like, the way they classify it, right? In order for them to qualify as services. It's not, you won't go in there and you'll find, this is examples, cancer, autism, dyslexia, whatever. But ADHD is in there with other health impairment.
Okay.
So right. I feel like they scale it and they make it seem like it's something less significant than it actually is.
Right.
And that's why they don't want to give the services that they should give for it.
Right.
But they can do a lot. They just feel like, they need to keep calling me or keep... No. Another thing that I find very difficult, and I think this is probably the thing that I find the most difficult, is that you can't prepare for ADHD. As much as I have learned about it, every day is still different. It is constantly changing and evolving. it presents differently at different ages and different stages in their life. So every time I think I have a handle on it, now they're X amount of pounds or X years old, and now the shit has changed and I don't know what the fuck to do. It's become something that is a depression point for me. And every time I feel like I have this under control, I don't. And I feel like that's very big, because neurodivergency has a multitude of conditions. But with ADHD in particular, I like to think of it as a gateway condition. And I say that because, for example, if a doctor comes to me and says, your child has cancer, I feel like that's something you can prepare for. They'll tell you, this is what it looks like. This is what to expect. And this is how we handle it. If my child has a diagnosis of cancer, that's what it is, right? That's what we deal with. But with ADHD, it's things sometimes that the doctor ain't even brought up because we haven't gotten there yet.
Right.
And they don't know if it's going to come or not. My child can have ADHD, and the potential for other conditions is still there as well. Like with my youngest son, there is concern now that he has some form of dyslexia. They can have ADHD and also be on the spectrum, have autism. A child with autism doesn't always have ADHD, but a child with ADHD can definitely and oftentimes be on the spectrum somewhere. So it's so many other things that can come from this. It is absolutely exhausting when you cannot prep for something, when it's constantly leading to other things. It's become something that has made me extremely depressed. Like when I go through my depression, like 9 out of 10 times, that's what it's about. It's about the fact that I cannot get a grip on this and my kids are off the wall at the younger ages. The one battle was figuring out what was wrong, right? Getting the diagnosis. Now that we have it, all of these appointments, all of these things that you have to constantly take them to. My oldest, right? He's 15. And so at 15, we're like, okay, you maneuver on your own, right? So, hey, here's your appointment time. But he doesn't function in the manner of a typical 15-year-old. So where my nephew cousin, at 15, we were like, yo, you got an appointment today. And it's like, all right, cool, got it. I jotted it down or whatever. My son is not doing that. So I'm constantly having to check up on him, even though he travels on his own, that he's going there, that he's not getting veered off on his way. When I tell y'all, because you can't prep for it, you can't just put it in a box and call it a day. It's exhausting. It's so time consuming. Even in the social life. My son wants to play soccer, the youngest one, right? And I would love to just sign him up for a soccer program, drop his little ass off, and use that time for me. But because he is so impulsive, he doesn't know how to share. It causes a lot of friction between him and other kids.
Right.
If I'm going to sign him up for soccer, I now have to sit my ass at soccer because of what could potentially happen. I don't know any other way to say it other than it's exhausting. It's depressing. The last thing I think for me that has been a struggle is having to constantly teach people how to treat my children. And I get it. It is hard because, like I said, it's constantly changing, right? So I may give you this rule today about how we deal with something. And then in 2 weeks, we have to do it differently because we just have to adjust. So like the language that they use with them. A lot of times people will say to them, where's your common sense? Use your common sense. And I'm constantly having to tell, we don't talk to them like that. The word common sense is not something we use with them because it's not a matter of common sense.
But I feel like with the common sense, I'm not one that uses it with them, but I could also say like common sense means common sense. It doesn't mean like required sense. So it's just something that's common.
Because they don't operate or rationalize, process, and think in a common manner, in what society deems to be typical based on the fact that this is how most people do it, it's not common for them. It's literally just about what makes sense in their mind based on how they put things together.
Okay.
Another big one is, why do I have to keep saying the same thing to you over and over? Or how many times do I have to say this to you, right? And even with me, I have to remind myself about that. But especially with other people, they'll go to family time and it's like, I told you to, why do I have to keep telling you to do this? Like, why do I have to keep saying? Because you do, like, so don't say that to them, right? That's not fair to say that to them because they have trouble remembering. They have trouble staying on task, and it's not something that they're choosing to do. It's beyond their control.
Right.
So to address a child in that manner is very unfair to them. And it does a lot to them. And that's part of the reason why they avoid, doing certain things.
What is a typical day like for you and your children?
Girl, a typical day is having to repeat the same thing that I've already repeated 1,001 times yesterday, 1,001 times today. And we'll have to repeat 1,001 times tomorrow. That is a typical day for me. Constant repetition, constant redirection. And what I've learned too is that routine is crucial for ADHD neurodivergent children because it forces them to build habit. Where with typical functioning children, we can say things 1 or 2 times and they automatically know they got to put it in the rotation. With kids with ADHD, it's not like that. So developing a routine and constantly implementing that routine is crucial to what a typical day could look like. If you don't have that routine, a typical day can look like an absolute disaster. But if you have that routine, it makes it a lot easier. Also, for me in my household, a typical day is constant refereeing, having to break the boys up. I believe it's because, one, of course, we live together. So there's really nowhere that they go where they're not in each other's face, right? So they get a lot of each other. But also where it pertains to them being ADHD neurodivergent, the fact that they are all presenting in different ways in different places, it makes it difficult for them to relate or understand the way the other person is behaving themselves and the fact that they don't always have the ability to control it.
Right.
So they're constantly getting into it. Like my youngest, he's so, his presentation right now is mostly hyperactive. So he gets home before the oldest and stuff. So the oldest one comes in and immediately the youngest one goes, "Ah!" and he jumps on him, right? But my oldest, he's not at that hyperactivity place, right? So he reacts badly to that. He's more so, especially as a teenager, he's more so in that place of like mood irritability, and he has typical teenage, but because of his diagnosis, because he has ADHD,
it's heightened.
Everything is heightened times 10, right? So he's extra moody. So the fact that my youngest son comes and jumps on him immediately, he's like, "Bro, how many times I gotta say you don't do that?" And it's like, you can't do, he just wants a hug. But unfortunately, as many times as we try to tell him and teach him, you have to ask first. This is about not invading people. Not every time people are in the mood. We understand you just want to enjoy people.
Right.
So he just keeps jumping on him. And my youngest is not understanding, like, his presentation is hyperactivity.
Right.
He's not always
Your
thinking
oldest,
to stop and my oldest. Like, your younger brother is not always thinking to stop and ask, right? Even my middle son, like, he's more so in that place of like, I just don't want to be. He's right in the middle of teenager. He's pre-teening, right? So it's like, bro, you're always doing too much. Like, your energy is always on 1,000, right? So they don't understand how to deal with each other's diagnosis and presentation. So I'm constantly having a referee. That's also a typical part of my day.
What are some different coping mechanisms that you're using with your children?
With my kids, we use a couple different things, right? For school purposes, they definitely have IEPs, right? Okay. We've come from a place where some of the, IEPs was absolute shit to now, we're getting some things done. Okay. But as far as like for school for them, we have the individualized education plans for them. Okay. At home, trying to, keep routine. Things look the same every day as far as what they're supposed to be doing, how they're supposed to be doing it. And then also one of the things, especially with my youngest, I didn't know this with my oldest, and because they're so different, right? My oldest was never as angry as the middle one is and the youngest one is, right? So that's never something I thought to do. But with them, I started meditation, like teaching him how to
relax.
Yeah, I don't know if it's
Patience.
redirect his energy,
Okay.
but tone it down, like
Okay.
responding appropriately, even though he might be upset or whatever. And so I taught him meditation. We started meditating, and
That's
you know,
nice.
he calls it like settling his energy, you know,
Okay.
whatever. So that's something that we use at home. As far as clinically, they're all on medication. And I know a lot of people have their own horror stories with medication. I know even till this day, a lot of the family members and friends are against the fact that the kids are on medication. But for me, it works. Okay, I have noticed the difference. And I'm not saying that we didn't have trial and error, right? I will be honest and say we didn't have scary, complete moments like they was just zombied out, like some people be saying. But there were, like, we had to adjust medication. And that's okay, right? When the doctor prescribes medication for the kid, first of all, it's a recommendation based on the trouble you tell them you have it.
Right.
You're never required to actually put the child on that medication just because they recommend that's, you have to say okay, and then they prescribe it. So, you know, I chose to go that route, and it has been very helpful for me. We've had to make some adjustments. Like with my oldest one, he started complaining of chest pain at one point when he was in his preteen years. So immediately I brought it to the doctor's attention, and they was like, get him off of that. Let's see if we can try something else. You know, they're all on medication.
Right.
So definitely medication. And it's working for me. They also receive therapy, and they see a psychiatrist for medication management, right? And that's a very big part of the treatment plan. I think a lot of people have gone through such bad experiences with medication because they didn't have a good care team in place. Where my kids go, the doctors that they deal with, they are very on top of it. Look out for this. If any of this happens, let me know immediately. Okay, these are the other medications that they're on for other reasons, asthma or whatever. I don't think it would be a good approach to try this medicine or to, you know, combine that with this. Or, okay, he's this much old. I know you telling me it's exhausting or whatever, but I don't think stimulant would be the best thing for him. Let's stay away from that and try a different route. So the care team that you have in place is very important to the experience that you'll have. So my kids have medication. They have a psychiatrist in place for medication management. They receive therapy. And they get a lot of clinic-based services.
Okay.
Siblings, if you are in my neck of the woods in New York and you have a child with ADHD, neurodiversity, or experiencing, you know, a condition, and you would like to know where my kids are receiving their clinical based services, hit us up in the DMs or in the comments, and I will definitely let you know, because they are an amazing, amazing facility that offers a lot of resources, and the team that they have, the providers that they have are amazing, and they're very on top of it.
That's our time, siblings.
And the short and sweet of this episode is that 1, it's important to advocate for your child.
2, it's okay if your black or brown child has ADHD or is neurodivergent.
And 3, create a treatment plan that works best for you and your family.
Before we head out, siblings, here's a quick word from your sisters to you.
Strength lies in differences, not in similarities. Credit to Stephen Covey. And whoever don't like it, Lamed Puyo. Follow us on Instagram, TikTok, Clapper, and X at 2DS Official Pod for behind-the-scenes sound bites and more.
Don't forget to follow us on your favorite streaming platforms.
Appreciate y'all for locking into another episode.
As always, tune in every Wednesday at 7 p.m. for conversation, culture, and comical sibling antics.
Until next time, siblings.